Okay. All right. We are going to go ahead and get started with our lesson here for today. We're going to be talking about Genesis, as I said, Genesis 49. We're going to go through Genesis 49 and look at Yaakov, how Yaakov blessed his sons. Okay, so there's many things that we're able to look at and see in these chapters. We basically want to kind of deal with, the different, um, you know, the spiritual significances that we find inside of the blessings. We want to try to look at those and see and seek to understand what's going on with these blessings. We talked a lot about blessings and the blessing of the children last week, and this is kind of like a continuation of that when we saw with last week how we dealt with the idea of Joseph's sons being blessed and even added to the number of the 12. Now we'll see the actual the blessings that go forward with the 12, and there's a lot going on with these things, so we want to just go ahead and get into it. I think we're probably just going to go as I have it here, just verse by verse, reading through it. So let's go ahead and get started. Yeah. Oh, here we go. All right, verse 1. Can you go ahead and read that verse 1 there?
And Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather together, so that I declare to you what is to befall you in the last days."
Okay, so when we look at this verse, really, not only just because it's the first verse, but what we find inside of this first verse really sets the stage um, for the entire thing over here. So we want to pay attention over here to this part of it. In the last days, in the last days, because again, if we remember, these are Jacob's last days. These are Jacob's last days, right? He's on his deathbed. um well, I guess he literally is on his deathbed, right? And he rises up to speak with his sons and to give them their blessings. So these are the last days. But I don't think that that's what he's talking about whenever he says that over here in this verse over here, because he said he's gathering you together to what is to befall you in the last days, right? So what is it that he's referring to over here? So we want to I should have made that a little bigger. But so the last days, that word is acharit, acharit, which means the last or end, hence the future. um when we look at this word, it kind of gives you this idea of like a future, like a thing, almost a prophetic kind of a situation going on here, right? So when we look in the scriptures, right, the term the latter days, which is another way to that this has been translated latter days or last days. The term the latter days is found several times in the Old Testament. I think it's about 13 or 14. I have a few of them here. But if we just go through some of these, like say for instance, I don't know, this one right here. Can you read this verse here? Can you see that? Is that too small?
Where?
Wait, let me put the arrow. Can you see my arrow here?
Okay, yeah. Yep. And in the latter days it shall be the mountain of the house of Yahweh is established on the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and the people shall flow to it.
Okay, good. That was Micah 4:1. Right. So when we see that there, that's obviously a prophetic utterance. How about Deuteronomy 31:29 right here?
For I know that after my death you shall do very corruptly and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil shall come to you in the latter days, because you do what is evil in the eyes of Yahweh, to provoke him through the work of your hands. Deuteronomy 31:29.
Okay, again, so we see this is basically every time. I put all the verses up here. If you want to later, I don't know, pause the tape, you know what I mean, and look at these verses here. Every one of these verses where this little phrase here is used, we see these is speaking in the prophetic sense. So it's talking about the latter days. It's it's like the end, right? The last days. How about one more? Let's read or what's this one in Ezekiel? Say this one here.
And you shall come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land in the latter days it shall be. And I shall bring you against my land in order that the nations know me, when I am set apart in you, O Gog, before their eyes. Ezekiel 38:16.
Okay, very good. So again, when we think about the verse that we're looking at over here in Genesis 49, where he says, gather so that I declare to you what is to befall you in the last days or the latter days, he's speaking prophetically to his sons, right? And so when we look at these blessings, we should also think about it in that way. And he's giving them these prophetic utterances to his sons, and they're connected to the blessings that he's given. Okay, so let's keep on going over here. Let's keep on going. So it is important to understand that there is prophetic significance. That's what I just got finished saying, attached to the blessings, right? There's prophetic significance, is spiritual significance is attached to these blessings. Excuse me. And that's what we want to kind of think about when we're going through this. Another thing to think about is interesting. It's interesting when you look, when you think about the way that these verses kind of were explained, in times past. It's interesting when you look at some of the things that many of the rabbis talked about in their kind of commentary on this chapter, was the fact that Jacob got a revelation as to who the Messiah was. And then he as soon as he got the revelation, it was kind of taken away. It's interesting that multiple of these ancient characters have this idea that Jacob knew who the Messiah was, and then it was hitting simultaneously. But in the theme of the chapter, he kind of gives you a almost a criteria for the Messiah, and the characters in the chapter, the sons, either meet or don't meet the criteria, right? They either have the what it takes to order to be the Messiah, or they don't. And we see the different characteristics that's attached to each one. And now on this side of everything, it becomes totally obvious to us. But we have to think about the fact that he's sitting up there talking to his sons who, they're not able to predict the future. When we
get the Torah yet.
Right, the Torah didn't even come down yet, right? So it's like we looking at it, it's almost kind of is completely obvious, which one which son the Messiah is coming through. But to them, we got to think about it too, in terms of the audience that was hearing this. To them, they have no idea, right? And so as these again, as these blessings are going forward, we were able to see these different characteristics that are and attributes that are connected with each one. And again, the thought about the thought process that's going on as it's coming through is kind of this which ones are gonna be, like who's gonna be the one, who's gonna be this messianic figure that's going to arise. Because again, we're talking about those things which are going to happen in these days to come, in these last days, in these latter days. And Israel at this point isn't even a nation. It's just a really big family, right? They're just a really big family. It's less than 70 people going that's over there, right? 70 if we count Joseph. And I guess it's a lot of people, but I'm saying it's not like a nation. Like it's not like hundreds of thousands of people, right? And so again, it's speaking now about what is yet to come, and we just want to go through the process of that, and see what's what with it. So let me just go on to the next slide here. I think I need like a clicker or something. That's not working. Okay, there we go. All right, so is that the next one? Yes. Okay. Verse 2. Can you read verse 2 for us there?
Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel, your father.
Okay, so again, we see this thing going on over here. Oh, wait. Oh, man, this thing shrunk down on me, didn't it? Okay, so when we look at this verse over here, verse 9, many different translations, within the many translations, most of the different translations make this word here, listen, and this one here, here, they translate them as different words. But in all actuality, that's both Shema. That's both Shema. They're both the same word. I don't know why the translators decided to make it be two different words in English, but in the original language, that's one word, Shema, which of course is to hear and obey, right? But the interesting thing that we want to think about looking at that is is the fact that we have this thing going on here where it says the sons of Jacob listen to Israel. This is so like we talked about this a little last week with this idea of this, the different significances of Jacob and Israel. Is calling to the sons of Jacob, listen to Israel. So I don't know how. I wish that wouldn't have got so small like that. Let the sons of the carnal man listen to the one that is concerned with and is persistent towards the spiritual. Hear these spiritually rich and prophetic words, because although they are spoken to men by a man, they contain truths that will go far beyond the lives of the ones that originally heard them. When we look at this little thing here that's going on in this verse, dealing with the sons of Jacob listening to Israel, it's doing probably the same thing that I would like to think that I call for people to do whenever we look at the scriptures here together, is that we want to be able to look to and understand the spiritual significance of things, right? So he's speaking to that carnal man and he's saying to them, let's think about things from a spiritual perspective, right? When we see that verse over there that says, "O sons of Jacob, listen to Israel, your father," right? It's because it's not as if we talk about two different individuals. Jacob is Israel, right? But we talking about two thought processes, right? That carnal mind versus that spiritual mind. And he's calling for the sons of Jacob to kind of rise up from a spiritual perspective and understand things in a different way, right?
I think that whenever people get inheritances, sometimes, like these are blessings, so these are spiritual things,
Yeah.
but people get inheritances, sometimes they get carnally minded, where somebody's blessing is greater than what my blessing is, and I get jealous or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess when we think about it from that perspective, right, we could say that, looking at what's getting ready to happen over here, we can see that there's definitely potential for one person to say, to rekindle the thing that got them there in the first place, right?
Joseph getting 2 blessings.
Joseph got 3 blessings, really, because Ephraim and Manasseh, that's a blessing for him. Those are his sons, even though they was adopted by his father. You can't, you know what I mean? So that's a blessing for him. And then whatever it is that he's going to receive over here. So that could potentially make somebody feel slighted, especially as we'll see, we get down to some of these blessings and there's like a few words and then the other ones is like several verses, right? And so it's calling for them to kind of have an elevated thought process in regards to what's going forth. It's not about carnality. It's not about being the supplanter. It's not about being and manifesting all of the characteristics that are connected with Jacob in the carnal mind. It's about Israel. It's about striving with Elohim and being a warrior for those things which pertain to the spirit. And he's trying to get them to hear what it is that he has to say, again, from this spiritual perspective, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and look into this some more, right? Let's go to the next slide. That's the trick. I got to go up to the top up there. Okay, so let's look at Reuben. Reuben. Okay. All right. Can you read verse 3 for us?
Reuben, you are my firstborn, my power and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of exaltation and the excellency of power.
Okay, very good. That when we hear that over there, right? That sounds magnanimous, right? The way he speaks about Reuben, right? You are my firstborn, my power, right? And the beginning of my strength. All of that stuff that he's saying over there, right? That sounds awesome, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When we look at this, right? So the first thing that is offered to Reuben is pure blessing. He is speaking directly. Oh my goodness. I got a typo in here. That should be position. He is speaking directly to the position of honor that naturally belongs to Reuben. The inaugural manifestation of his reproductive capabilities are expressed in and through Reuben, right? It's a shame that I messed up that wonderful sentence with this little typo over here. But anyway, so we look at this, right? When we hear all of those things, right? The firstborn, he's my strength, all these things. It's pure blessing, right? But this third verse is powerful. This third verse that we're looking at is powerful, both literally and figuratively, right? From a literal perspective and from a figurative perspective, right? Look at this, right? The 7 words of power. These things that Reuben receives. This is like the opening words that come out of Jacob's mouth when he's getting into these things. A blessing. The 7 words of power. So let's look at these 7 words. When we look at just so nobody don't sit up here and try to think that I can't count very well. When we look at this in the Hebrew, I'm saying 7 words because over here, excellency is said 2 times. Excellency of exaltation and excellency of power. So if we counted that 2 times, I guess it would be more than 7, right? But I just counted it once. Okay, just in case we have some checkers, some fact checkers out there. Right? Okay, so Reuben, right? These are the 7 words. The firstborn, my power, the beginning of my strength, not just my strength, but the beginning of my strength, excellency of exaltation and power. Excellency of power, right? Okay, so let's look at these things, and because we want to look at these, he's showering Reuben with these with these things over here, right? Which again this is just his natural position in life, right? No, this don't have anything to do with anything besides the fact of Reuben being the first time Jacob's seed reached a destination and manifested life, right? And so it's not about the things that Reuben has done, it's purely about his position. And these things that he's saying over here are things that are just connected to that position, right? And so let's look over here at these words over here. Firstborn, that is Bek-or, which literally is firstborn chief, eldest son, firstborn ling, right? It literally means what it says, firstborn, the chiefest or the eldest son. And we know in Israel what that means. The firstborn has this special blessing, although when we look at Israel, right, we see many times when the position of firstborn is never diminished, but the literal firstborn a lot of times seems to get moved out of the way, and somebody else taking that position of honor. But
even when you look at like the priest took over the firstborn.
Yeah, right.
So it's like,
and they're down the line.
Mm-hmm.
They're way down the line. They skipped over a few people to get to that position, right? And so the position, we know that the position is something that is a coveted position. It's an important position in Israel. But we also see throughout time that many people get moved out of that spot and replaced by others, right? And so we'll keep on going, right? So might, in some versions it reads, "You are my firstborn and my might." Some versions say strength. What's the King James version say? King James says might. And that's what we looked at here. Might, which is koach. Koach, which means from an unused root, meaning to be firm, vigor, strength, something that's vigorous, right? Force, might, strength, power, right? We see all of that in this idea here of koach, right? I don't want to spend too much time looking at these. I just want to show these words here. Firstborn, might, beginning, reshit, right? First, again, the idea of the position. First in place, time, order, or rank. Beginning, chief, chiefest, or those first fruits, right? Reshit. That's like the first word in the whole scriptures, right? Berashit. Okay, strength. That is own, which means let's see here, ability, power, figuratively wealth and force, right? He's given all of these things. All of these things really they're kind of almost synonyms for each other, and all of these words are being used piled up on top of each other to describe again, pointing towards Reuben, placed kind of in his hands this position of power, all of these things: strength, ability, power, wealth, force, right? Excellency, right? This word is yeter, which means an excess, superiority. Let's see, plentifully, right? This thing exceeding, abundant, right? All of these things are connected with this word yeter, which I believe we'll see again later, but we'll get to that, right? Let's see what else here. Dignity, which is also a word where it says, let's see, excellency in rank and excellency in power. Hold on, what version says dignity?
KJV says dignity as well.
Okay, good. So, which again is, like I said, all these words are really synonyms of each other, but the key is that they're being like why was all of these things had to be used, right? He could have got to the point where maybe two of them being used, right? But it's just over and over again, these words: excess, superiority, right? All of these things over here, right? All right, let's keep on going here. And lastly, Oz, which is power: vehement, harsh, fierce, mighty, power, strong, right? All of these things are said, right, on the firstborn. So he said all that. He said all of those things about Reuben. And then, right, curses. Interesting. Read for us verse 4.
Boiling like water, you do not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch.
Okay, very good. So when we look over here now, we look over here at what goes on with Reuben. I have highlighted there boiling. Some versions say unstable, but that word, this word here, interesting word. This is an English word, but it literally means to boil, or to seethe. This ebullition. That's English, folks. But that means boiling, right? Or froth. When that thing is raging, when there's when that water is boiling and overflowing, right? That's what that word means. And then it's been translated as unstable. But look, figuratively, it means lust. Right. And so when we think about now where he went, what he did, right? That's how we can get that connection there, where it's talking about this boiling water. And again, we have to remember with the Hebrew language is about action, right? It's about action. So it's giving you this term that literally means boil, but it don't mean that that he's boiling, right? It's giving us a picture to help us to understand what happens with lust. This thing that's going on. It starts as like this little simmer, and it just grows and grows and grows. So it overflows and it becomes uncontrollable.
It's like King David when he was looking outside his window.
Yeah.
Bubbling up on him.
Yeah. 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 It's just that inner thing that happens. And And if you quench it early, then you're good, right? But if you notice, I don't know how many people boil water before. If that thing's raging and then you just turn the fire off, it rages a little bit longer, right? If you wait too long, there's nothing you can do. It's just gonna boil over, right? And so when we look at Reuben, right, it says he is boiling as water, and then you shall not excel. The version that I have says any longer. That's in what you call it, italicized. And so that's interesting because when we think about this over here, right? Boiling like water, you do not excel. We're gonna look at this over here. Is connected to one of these words that we just looked at over here, and so which means to exceed. This is a version of one of the words that we just looked at. That was talking about his excellency and rank. Excelling in rank and power, not no more. Not no more, right? Because of what he did, right? So it gives us all of that stuff. You're this, you're that, my strength, firstborn, my vigor, excellency in rank, excellency in power. But since you so unstable as water, you shall not excel anymore. It's done, right? It's a done deal for you. And again, if we look at this, as a play on words going on over here, right? Because if we was to look in the scripture, in the Hebrew, the word that is given you is the same word. It's the same word. So, and that's another thing to think about when we think about these things, these prophetic utterances. You see it a lot in the Psalms with the way things are written, kind of different acrostic scriptures. When we go through the scriptures, and like each line begins with a particular letter going through the alphabet, and so on and so forth. But it's interesting when we look at these particular blessings here in this chapter, we see over and over again, Jacob actually is spitting bars over here. Jacob actually there's like double entendres going on when he's talking and giving these blessings and these curses to the people, his sons, as where he talked about the fact that you are excellent, but now you won't be excellent anymore. And he's using these same, you shall not excel. He's using these same words, but we can't see it in English, right? And if the translator got it right, maybe we can see it, but it's more apparent when we're able to look back into the Hebrew and see what's actually going on over here. But again, when we look at this and see that he went from being in this place, this position of power, to being demoted, I would say, as a result of his carnality. And then even if we think about the how this even started, sons of Jacob, listen to Israel, your father, right? And Reuben in times past needed to listen to Israel, right? No, he didn't. Okay. All right. So, okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So, just thinking of that, it reminds me of our people. Our people are so talented, and could excel in so many places, but due to their carnality, they don't excel. I mean, our people are just so fleshy and so carnal that it just thwarts anything that they possibly could be.
Yeah. 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 And and beyond that, it turns into this thing where it's not even like a temporary thwarting, right? It ends up being permanent because of these decisions, that these knee-jerk, carnal, kind of just spur of the moment decisions that one makes. It ends up having long-lasting, eternal consequences. Like there's no way that Reuben's able to undo what he did over there in Genesis 35 and 22. What can you read that?
And it came to be, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard about it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12.
And now if we go back to Genesis 35, even we can see a beginning of it right here. It's something that happened. Israel heard about it, and then life goes on. It's not. It didn't really go on. Inside the mental Rolodex of Yaakov, there was a check mark right there, right? And that thing, he knew about it. He heard about it, right? He knew about it and he heard about it, and he put that check mark in his mental Rolodex. And now in his final utterances, we see what happened. Reuben, you was great. You was great. You was in a position of greatness. Anything that you could have possibly wanted is due you, right? 2 times over, double portion of it is due to you. But you sat up here and you allowed your carnal mind and your flesh to rule over you, and now it's all gone. Everything that was due you is no more for you. Right? So if we think, it's been revoked, right? Access denied, right? Incorrect password, right? All of that. And so when we think about the criteria for the Messiah, we're able to X Reuben off the list, right? Because he's been disqualified, right? Again, thinking about it from their point of view, because we already know where the Messiah came from, right? But I'm saying, thinking about it from their point of view, given the characteristics, at first you might think, wow, it's going to be him. Like, he's the firstborn. He's all of this stuff, right? And then we get the rest, which is supposed to be the blessings, by the way. And it wasn't even a blessing, right? He just kind of sandwiched it. He fluffed it up. He made it sound good at the beginning before he hit him with the hardness after the fact, right? And it's not even a sandwich. It's an open face sandwich. He didn't even come back. He didn't even come. It's a tuna melt, right? He didn't even come back with the goodness after the fact. He just left him hanging like that. You shall not excel. You're done because of this thing that you did, right? That you didn't have no business doing in the first place. Okay, let's keep on going over here. Okay, so let's also look at, I changed the format of this and it shrunk everything. Can you read for us First Chronicles 5:1 right there for us?
As for the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was the firstborn. But because he profaned his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph. So of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to the birthright.
Okay, very good. So we saw in Genesis, where the thing happened, and then we see after the fact in Chronicles, where it literally talks about the fact of his position being revoked. Right, his birthright was literally given to the sons of Joseph. It says over there in Chronicles, right? And so when we look over here, we're able to see exactly, right? So now we actually get more insight into why Reuben and Simeon were brought up in the last chapter, right? They really did get moved out of the way, right? They literally got moved out of the way by Ephraim, and Manasseh, right? Based on things that they have done, right? And so, again, when we're thinking about this from a spiritual perspective, we have to be sure. This is why we have to, it matters. It matters, what you do. It matters, these things that we do, how we live our lives. It matters. These men who were favored in their family made decisions that were life-changing for from a negative perspective, that changed their situation forever, and it was irrevocable. They wasn't able to turn around from it. And it causes us to be able to think about the fact that the things that we do have everlasting consequences, right? The things that we do have everlasting consequences, and we have to take those things into account. You can't just go around and sit around just saying anything that you want to say to people. You can't go around and just do whatever you want to people, right? Because you can't take those things away, right? Those things are forever, right? Especially when the people, the one who you are offending, is the creator and sustainer of all things, right? We have to, scripture talks about the fact that every word that we speak is going to be taken into account. And so we have to think about these things, right? We have to think about our position with the Father, right? Is he pleased, right? Has he moved us out of the way, right? And put somebody else in our spot, right? All right, so let's keep on going over here. Let's keep on going. Let's go to the next spot here and deal with Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi. They don't even get their own spot, right? Inspiration gives it to us. Jacob, Yaakov, Israel gives us this as one, right? Okay, read for us verses 5-7.
Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their weapons are implements of violence. Let my being not enter their council. Let my esteem not be united to their assembly, because they killed a man in their displeasure, and they lamed an ox in pleasure. Cursed be their displeasure, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel.
Okay, very good. Okay, so let's think about this thing over here. So all 12 of these men are brothers. So why is Jacob stating the obvious here when he says Simeon and Levi are brothers? They all brothers, right? They all brothers. What's he doing? What is that? When we look, their reason for receiving a curse rather than a blessing is from the situation that happened in Shechem. All right. Let's see here. Can you just begin reading right there for us? That's the beginning of that scripture right there that tells us what happened in Shechem. Can you start reading right there?
And it came to be on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Naiah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. And they killed Hamor and Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, and took Benaiah from Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister.
Okay. Keep on going there. Oh, hold on a second. There we go.
They took their flocks and their herds, and their donkeys, they which were, and that which was in the city, and that which was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones and their wives they took captive, and they plundered all that was in the houses. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me by making me a stench among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I am few in number. They shall gather themselves against me and shall strike me, and I shall be destroyed, my household and I. But they said, should he treat our sister like a whore?
Okay, so when we refer back to Genesis 34, where this thing happened, which again apparently was the thing as far as Jacob was concerned that caused them to receive a curse and not a blessing. This thing was terrible to him, right? It caused his name to be a stench among their neighbors, right? Among the inhabitants of the land. This thing was, as far as he was concerned, was just irreparable. There wasn't no coming back from this thing that they had done. And again, it puts them in the position they didn't even get nothing nice said about them. Simeon and Levi, there was nothing that could be said. So if we add Simeon to Reuben, right? When we think back, where hold on. If we think back to where in the last chapter, where again Ephraim and Manasseh be like Reuben and Simeon, the same way that those two both lose, they lost their position, right, to Ephraim and Manasseh. And we can see both of those ones, well, not including Levi. I guess if there was another one, they could have added them to it. But down the line, Reuben, Simeon, 1, 2 got knocked out just like that of their position, right? They still got inheritance. They still was counted part of the 12 sons. But in terms of position now, they were moved out of the way based on these things that they've done, right? And so now when we look, hold on. Okay, so Simeon and Levi over there, they did their dirt together. So they was cursed together, right? So their brotherhood was within, their behavior, right? Those was the two that was ready to go and do what they felt needed to be done, um, yeah, didn't matter. And so we can relay that back to the idea of Reuben, and that this the idea of that boiling water, that lust. There potentially, I would say, was a way that they could have honored their sister, um, which, I would say personally something that needed to be done in terms of the honoring of their sister, right? The repairing of the breach that happened in that situation. But thinking about it from Jacob's perspective, you know, we could at least say that potentially there was another way that they could have reached the same or similar result without doing it like that.
And they had no remorse when Jacob confronted them.
No, they didn't care.
Their response was like,
yeah, well, what was we supposed to do? Like, they didn't have a choice. In their mind, there was no other way. There was no other way. There was only that. Well, I mean, what?
What else was I supposed to do?
Yeah.
That's how they acted. They didn't have any remorse at
No,
all.
they didn't. They didn't care. Not to speak to whether they should or shouldn't have done it, only to say that when we think about these blessings and these curses from the perspective of Jacob, this is his reasoning why they're cursed, right? Why he don't want no counsel to come from them, right? He don't want to be joined to their company, right? Because of the propensity for wrath and anger and swiftness to judgment that he sees inside of what they did, which was it was a swift they were swift to judgment in that situation. They probably didn't weigh the options. They just, this needs to be done. They did what to my sister? They're gonna die for this, right? And so when we think about that now, again, we think about these things from a spiritual perspective, we have to be able to try to figure out what it is that we can learn from all of these things. So again, when we think about this, what went on with them, not even to say that the what they were trying to do was something that was wrong, but the way in which they did the thing, we could say is wrong. And so again, now when we think about that, it helps us to understand about wisdom and discretion, right? I can attempt to do the right thing wrong, right? Go about doing the right thing in a wrong way, which makes the whole thing wrong, right? I can sit up here and have good intentions about a thing, but the way that I go about doing the thing could just ruin the whole thing altogether. And again, that's wisdom, that's discretion, right? And that's what the Spirit does in us. And so when we think about, again, looking at Simeon and Levi, as we look at how the blessings and the curses are going forth, and we ain't even got no blessings yet, right? And we see that these actions that they did, these things that they did, which again, they're honoring their sister and this terrible thing that happened to her. But the thing that we can learn from this again is that, wisdom could have been exercised, right? Discretion could have been exercised, right? They could have went about it in a way that didn't, as far as Jacob was concerned, bring dishonor to him, right? Again, he was just utterly put back by this whole situation that they did. And obviously there was no comeback from it. He wasn't able to get over this thing that happened, right? Where again, it puts him in this place of of cursing, right? All right, so let's keep on going here. Go to the next slide. Okay, so the very last part of these verses seem very interesting. We see another example of this Jacob and Israel thing, right? Which probably helps us to understand the why of it all. So when you think about things, it seems appropriate to assume negative with one and positive with the other. There must be a difference. We think about Jacob and Israel. Anyway, the way I'm thinking about it, the way I think about the significance of Jacob and Israel, when I see one, it causes me to think about things from a negative perspective. When I see the other, it causes me to think about things from a positive perspective. It seems like there should be a difference over here. It seems like one should be negative and one should be positive. The one that's connected with Jacob should be something that's negative, the division. It seems like the scattering should be something that's associated with positive because it's talking about Israel. Okay, so let's see what this guy has to say about it. Simeon and Levi were associate in wickedness, and the same prediction would be equally applicable to both their tribes. Levi has cities allotted to them in every tribe on account of their zeal against idolatry. They were honorably look how he talks about it. They were honorably divided in Jacob, whereas the tribe Simeon, which was guilty of the grossest idolatry and the vices inseparable from it, were ignominiously scattered. Now, this is what Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown had to say about it. I would obviously reverse it, right? Because when you think about Levi being scattered in the nations and not having an inheritance, it really wasn't a negative thing, right? So I would connect the scattering to the Israel and the division to Jacob. I would connect the dividing to Simeon and the scattering to Levi, because again, when we think about Levi, there were 40 Levitical cities, right? There was a bunch of Levitical cities. They were in all of the other nations, all the other tribes. So they was all over the place. And so you could think about it, I guess, from a negative perspective, but there was the priests. So how could you?
They got free food.
Free food. That's funny. That's funny. That's the blessing that you say right there. They
had to work for it.
Yeah. And so again, when you look at this situation over here, to me, I feel like the blessing is something that they don't even see at that time, right? Because they don't know what's going to happen. Because again, one thing that was mentioned by the commentators over there was that kind of the transition point was the whole situation began at least with the whole golden calf situation, right? Where the idolatry that was going on, they was the ones that stepped up to the plate and began moving in their zealousness against idolatry. And then other things happened after that. But the one thing that's interesting that we see over here, right, is that within them it's the same propensity that they have inside of them. And that part don't change, right? Somebody needed to be killed as a result of wrongness. We'll do it. We'll be the ones that do it, no problem, right? That's the same thing that their father did over there, right? When you look at Pinchas, whenever he sat up there and killed the Israelite person and the Moabite person when they was doing whatever they was doing, wickedness is rising up. Some got to be done right now. No conversation. Death is due, right? It's the propensity never changes, right? But and again, I'm saying that before, like it's kind of a question as to you know, the ways and means upon which they doing these things. But I'm saying at the end of the day, the thing that was kind of a curse winds up being a blessing for at least Levi, right? We see that same zeal for rightness exists, but obviously Levi and his lineage go through a greater desire for righteousness, and they're obviously blessed as a result of it. Okay, so let's just keep on going over here. All right. So let's go to the next one, Yehuda. We'll look at the next one here. If we can read verses 8 and 9.
You, Yehuda, your brothers praise you. Your hands is on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children bow down before you. Yehuda is a lion's cub. From the prey you have gone up, my son. He bowed down. He crouched like a lion, and like a lion who does rouse him.
Okay, very good. So when we look over here, let's see what we have here. Oh, that's just okay. So when we look at this at Yehuda, it's interesting when we see where again it's a situation where when we look in the Hebrew, we're able to see things, where we understand what the Hebrew even means. We're able to see things from a different perspective, right? So if we was to look at this in the Hebrew, this here says Yehuda, your brothers praise you, right? But we also know that Yehuda actually means praise, right? So this, we could look at this and say, you praise, your brothers praise you, right? So Jacob at this time talks about the fact that what your name is, Yehuda, is given to you by your brothers, right? Which is interesting. But again, it's part of this thing now. Okay, so just when we look over here, we see now, like we was talking about before, in terms of people, the brothers looking at this from a spiritual, not carnal perspective. Yehuda is one of those ones, right? Well, there's only two, Yehuda and Joseph, who have like these, you know, comparatively speaking, they got a lot of things to be said about them, right? So we look over here, right? Your hand is on the neck of your enemies, right? Your fathers. So when we think about, first of all, you know, the idea that praise is from the brothers is given to the one who's called praise. But then over here, we see this idea of strength being attached, right? Your hand is on the neck of your enemies, right? We see now this idea of might and strength being associated with Yehuda. Your father's children's bow down before you, right? So this also is, so now we talking about the father's children, I guess is his brothers. It's the same thing. It's kind of reiterating it another way. Yehuda is a lion's cub. For they prey, from the prey you have gone up, my son. You bowed down. He crouched like a lion, and like a lion, he does rouse him. Who does rouse him? Who does rouse the lion? So over here, we almost see like a process over here of Yehuda being just this little baby lion, right? He starts off just this little lion, just the fourth born, no big deal. He's just this little lion's cub, right? You was a prey. From the prey, you have gone up. You used to be a prey, right? But you've grown up. You've grown up from being that prey, right? And you rose up to be a lion. Who does rouse him? The lion. The lion's kind of this little calm and collected thing over here. The lion ain't to be messed with, right? It's not to be messed with, the lion, right? But who can arouse them, right? They're not excitable things, lions. But when it comes down to it, they gets down to it, right? And so we see Jacob dealing with his son, talking about his son, and the fact that prophetically speaking, right, he goes from these small beginnings, right, to move up and to grow and to be this one who is worthy of the praise of his brothers, and the process even potentially within it. So now when we look at these things, we can obviously see things over here that connect us to the idea of things that now finally we're seeing, these things that can be connected to characteristics that belong to these messianic figures, who was just a regular little cub, right? But grows up to be powerful, right? And ready to crouch and pounce on those that need to be crouched on, and have his hand on the neck of the enemies, right?
And the brothers are gonna respect them too.
Right. It's not going to be like a kind of backbiting or what have you going on over here. It's not like he's just some little upstart that they're sitting up and saying, look at this guy over here, right? It says that your brothers praise you. Okay. All right. All right. So let us look at verse 10 over here. Verse 10.
The scepter shall not turn aside from Yehuda, nor inscriber from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him unto him and to him is the obedience of peoples.
Okay, very good. So now over here, now we see this idea of royalty. When we deal with this idea of this scepter thing. Now you talking about situations now that don't even exist in their reality, right? Because they're again just dealing with they're just a family, right? They're just a family, a huge family, a tribe of people, right? But you talking about this scepter now, you talking about royalty and position as king now. Like how did it get to that place over here when we think about Yehuda, right? Shall not turn aside. The scepter shall, you talking about a kind of kingship associated now with Yehuda, Now to them, again, they're like, what? Like, we're is there gonna be something that happens that's kind of similar to Joseph and his situation, where we can see that he's a king, but you're talking about, well, he's like unto a king, but you're talking about Yehuda now, nor an inscriber from between his feet. Like he's gonna have like a scribes, somebody writing about his every thing that he does, the things that he does are going to be so important that there has to be people writing about them constantly. Again, when we look at this for us is obvious. But to them, it's like, this is future prophetic. They don't hardly even understand what's being said over here with this whole thing. Because they're talking about kingship, and they don't even have a kingdom to be king of. Well, they do have their little thing that they've been given over there, but yeah,
I mean,
exactly. They don't have a kingdom, they don't have a land, none of that.
but I think that people just take it at face value that Judah got to be rank.
What do you mean?
They don't really ask why. They don't ask how. They don't ask about the mechanism behind it. But looking at these blessings, you can see how he rose up in rank amongst the brothers. You know what I mean?
I think at bare minimum, we can say that there's qualities that exist in each one of the brothers that would allow for whatever it is that's being said about them to be something that's true. Right? Where they hear, well, the scepter shall not turn aside from you. And potentially it could be this thing that's like so far away from reality that they can't even fathom it. But also potentially it could be like, yeah, that that's how he rolls. Like he's like that. You know what I mean? I could see that. Right. And it would take them, again, looking at these things from that spiritual perspective, to be able to see it. When they do that, when they do look at it from a spiritual perspective, potentially they could look into the future and say, I see the attributes that exist within my brother, and I can see where his seed who comes and grows greater than their father, how they can get to that place of being at this high ranking position. Okay, so also we see over here until Shiloh comes, and to him is the obedience of peoples. Right. And so when we look over here at this idea of Shiloh, we look at that and we see this word that sometimes it's translated, sometimes it's most times it's put like it is here in this version as kind of this as a name. I think some of the problems that exist with this being a name of an individual is that I believe that this is actually in the feminine tense. So it's probably more so, if you was going to say it was a name, it would be actually a place, because places we know are feminine. But an individual, if it was a man, that obviously would be masculine, right? So some interpreters go ahead and I'm trying to pull up here my notes about this Shiloh situation. Let's see here. Okay, so the exact wording of the statement varies between translations. Most versions obscure the real meaning by using the word Shiloh as if it were the proper name of the Messiah. This word should, in fact, be taken as a possessive pronoun. The best translation is probably actually the NIV, which says, until he comes to whom it belongs. Or more literally, the translation of the version would read, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until he comes whose right it is, and unto him shall the obedience of the peoples be. And then also that way of translating Shiloh into being kind of this phrase as opposed to a name is how they do it in the Septuagint. And then also, if we look at Ezekiel 21 and 27, let me see if I can. I think it'll be too hard for me to go out of this. I'll just read it. Ezekiel 21 and 27 says, a ruin, a ruin, a ruin, I shall make it. This also will be no more until he comes whose right it is, and I shall give it to him. That's actually the New American Standard Version of the verse. But we see that word Shiloh being translated as this little phrase, whose right it is, in terms of the word being kind of this thing that's going on. Still attributing it to the Messiah, but just not making it be like the name of the Messiah, but more so something that is due to the Messiah. And so when we think about this now, Shiloh, again, these attributes that are connected to this messianic figure, of whom praise is due, and kingship is due. And over here it says, and to him is the obedience of the obedience is also due. Another something else that we wanted to think about is the fact that this word here, until, as if it stops whenever a certain time comes, right? And sometimes when we see this until, it's not the way necessarily like we think about it, like after the thing, it's not going to be anymore, right? Until Shiloh comes. But it can also be something that's kind of inclusive, as if to say, not as if to say he's going to be king and worthy of praise up until a particular point. Because when we think about it from Messiah's standpoint, from a physical standpoint, we know that he's not physically walking around. But from a spiritual standpoint, Yeshua, Messiah, is actually our king. It got to a place in time wherever he became manifest, right? It got to a place in time where he became manifest, but it's not as if we say that now he's not reigning, or he's still, he's not the king because he's not walking around. And so again, when we think about this from a prophetic standpoint, it's not always something that's necessarily cut and dry, because again, to them at that time, they had no idea about Yeshua of Nazareth, who lived and died and rose again on the third day and sent back his Ruach HaKodesh for believers to receive and go around in power. They didn't know about any of those things, right? It's all these prophetic utterances that we are able to look at and understand from our perspective, but they, is kind of obscure to them. Okay, I kind of went through some of this here. Okay, can you read for us 11 and 12?
Binding his donkeys to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk.
Okay, so when we look at this now, this is something that deals with prosperity. It's something that deals with richness and abundance. When we think about Judah, it was a land, the place where Judah ended up inheriting. It was a place that was, grapes was a commodity of the area, right? They were rich in vines and grapes and things of the sort. So when we think about the idea of binding a donkey to a vine and the donkey's colt to the choice vine, it's almost as if to say, I have so much. Because if you tied your donkey to the choice vine, it's gonna trample and stomp all over your stuff and ruin it. That's what's gonna happen. But this is to speak of the abundance of the tribe and the place that they got, that they'll have so many vines and so many choice vines that to tie their donkeys to these choice vines and have the donkeys ruin them wouldn't even phase them. Right? That's the thought process that's going forth with this whole idea over here with this whole thing with binding the donkeys to the vine. They got so much, it's not even that big deal. Like you sitting up here, like people, sit around here and have like, if you think about today, some rich person could probably take some dollars bills and like use them for like to light fires with or something. Right? You got so much money, like you don't even need. You can make pillows out of it or whatever. Like you know what I mean? It's like the idea is that there's so much in abundance. Is that the door? There's so much in abundance that you're able to lose, right? You don't have to kind of like we sit up here, like I got my 3 little grapevines in the back, and I'm counting every grape that comes off of the thing, right? If I lose one little grape, like it's the worst thing that could possibly happen, right? But over here, the idea is the prosperity is so great where it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you wouldn't think twice to tie your colt to it, because if it ruins it, so what? I have others, right? And you have the same idea over here with this idea of washing your garments in wine and your robes in the blood of grapes. Like you wouldn't naturally, like you wouldn't do that, right? It ruins it, right? If I have these clothes, I'm not gonna wash it in grape juice. But the idea here is prosperity and richness and fullness, right? Overabundance of things, right? That's the idea. which from a physical perspective, you know, the land was actually great in that respect, right? Okay, so let's go on. Let's move on. All right, Zebulun. Let's look at Zebulun. These next ones are all kind of rapid fire. Okay, Zebulun dwells at the seashore. He is my fault. Hold on. Read that for me. I gotta pull this up.
Zebulun dwells at the seashore. He is for a haven for ships, and his border is unto Tisdan.
Okay, something that I wanted to call to our attention as it relates to Zebulun is the fact that here, let me see if I can find my actual notes on this. Because if we actually were to find the borders of Zebulun, we will also find that it doesn't touch the water actually, right? The Zebulun actually is landlocked, right? There's land all around. And so again, when we think about the fact that these are prophetic utterances, we find out that these things are looking forward into the future. Again, this was we started off talking about these are things that are dealing with the last days, right? So if we looked, for instance, if we was to look in Joshua, you can write this down. If you was to look in Joshua 19, 10 through 16, it goes into telling you the borders of Zebulun. And again, Zebulun is landlocked. There was tribes around it. Asher and Naphtali was around Zebulun. And so are you able to pull up Ezekiel 48 and 26 and read that?
Yep.
Ezekiel 48 and 26.
Ezekiel 48, 26.
Yeah, what's that say?
In the King James, and by the border of Issachar, from the east side unto the west side, Zebulun a portion. You want me to continue? It goes on.
What's your version say?
And by the border of Issachar, from the east side unto the west side, Zebulun a portion.
Oh, so the version, the version that I have, look, the version that this is the this version here says and next to the territory of Issachar, from the side of the east up to the side of the sea, Zebulun one portion. This is the let's see what version this is. This is the Lexham English version. What's the New American Standard version say?
I got it here.
Beside the border of Issachar, from the east side to the west side, Zebulun one portion.
Oh, it says that too in that version. That's interesting because this the only version that has the mentions the sea. Is Ezekiel 48, 26.
What version is that?
It's called the Lexham English Bible. It's a literal translation like unto the New American Standard.
I don't even have that.
He just read the New American Standard. The point is that the borders that's given in Ezekiel are wider, are broader borders. They're broader borders as opposed to the ones that we see in the previous. And Ezekiel being a prophecy of future things going on in the future, it adds to the thought that these things are being said about Zebulun because it's pointing forward into the into the future. But again, you have to be able to look into the text, the original text, to be able to find this. Because one thing about when you look at these different translations of Bibles, the translators are looking at words and things that that don't correspond with the English. And so we can have all of these different translations who are expressing things different ways, and they're doing the best that they can do with the languages. Because a lot of times we look at these things, it's times we could look at words in the Hebrew and the word doesn't mean anything close. It's not even kind of a tip of the iceberg of a definition of these things that we see in the Hebrew when it's translated over into the English. Because again, these English words are really giving you an action. So the Hebrew words are giving you an action. It wants you to do a thing, and then when you're doing the thing, it helps you to understand what the word is. And so sometimes we lose in these translations the meaning behind the words in general. But the overall thing that we're looking at here is the fact that when we think about these blessings that are going forth towards the children now, it's looking forward, and it doesn't necessarily correspond with the way in which things actually were, right? Because with Zebulun, his border wasn't on the sea. With Judah, he wasn't a king, right, at the time of the blessing. But those are things that were to happen in the last days. Okay, let's keep on going. Let's look at Issachar. I notice we got all the curses out of the way, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Everything now going forward is just about the blessings. And so to them, it's almost as if, as you're going through, if we're thinking about the end times, if we're thinking about looking back at the 12 and trying to decipher who could potentially be a messianic figure, it hurried up and got the first three. Yeah, the first three brothers got knocked out of the running, and then the rest was just compared. The rest are just ones that could potentially be there. But even so far, it got to be Judah, though. Right. There's nice things said. There's nice things said about these other brothers, but up until now, none. No. There's nice things to be said. Like even here, what's 14 and 15 say over there?
Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between two burdens. And he saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant. And he inclined his shoulder to bear a burden, and became a subject to slave labor.
Okay, so it's interesting things that are talked about when we look at Issachar and his thing. When we see over here, like even with these verses over here, it says that he's strong, right? Lying down between two burdens. He's strong, but he saw that that resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant, and he inclined his shoulder to bear a burden. Issachar was not about war. Issachar wasn't really about war. Not that he was weak, but he was about farming. Issachar was about like the agriculture, and Issachar was about taking care of his natural responsibilities and his field. He really wasn't about no, he wasn't about none of that, right? But the thing was the way that he was positioned in terms of in the future again. Now, the way that he was positioned, he was vulnerable to these other uh nations, as where he would end up being um dealt with by these other, as it says over here, subject to slave labor, because of the fact that he wasn't a warrior, but he was vulnerable in his position. And so we're able to see over here where the prophecy is not saying that he's weak. In fact, the opposite is being said, that he's actually strong, but he's not a warrior, right? He's about tilling land and like carrying bales of hay and things of that nature, right? So again, we look at these things. It's again, these are blessings. They're good characteristics to have, but so far when we look at these things, nobody really can beat. Nobody can beat.
This guy, obviously, his people aren't going to be king.
No, he's just regular folk. Issachar and them, they're just regular people. That's blue collar folk. They out here, they just about going to work and coming back. You know what I mean? That's what Issachar is into.
They ain't got a bunch of grapes and stuff.
Nah. They don't got grapes overflowing. They ain't washing their clothes and wine and stuff, right? Okay, let's look at Dan. All right, 16 through 18. You read that.
Dan rightly rules his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan is a serpent by the way, an adder by the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its riders falls backward. I have waited for you. I have waited for your deliverance, O Yahweh.
Okay, very good. So Dan means to judge, right? Dan means judge. He rightly rules Dan dans his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Again, we look at these kind of the way these things are written is kind of is poetic. Dan is calling them a serpent, and we thinking about serpent as being negative, but this small serpent is able to defeat this huge animal, right? I think that's the point, right? He may be small in stature, but he's able to defeat these larger things, right? And cause them to fall backwards. Samson actually was from the tribe of Dan, right? And so we can look and we can find at least one hero that's connected to Dan some of the commentators, when we look at some of these rabbinic commentators, because when we look at this, right, it goes through this thing and says, I have waited for your deliverance, O Yahweh. One of these ancient commentators is he talked about the fact Jacob thought that Dan was the one, and then in his revelatory vision saw that Samson, he ends up dying, right? And so he must not have been the one. So now we have this last part. I have waited for I wait for your deliverance. It wasn't him, it's going to be someone after them. But all that being said, we see with Dan their qualities of rightness and right ruling, that he's a small but mighty, but still there's awaiting a longing still for deliverance outside of Dan. And then also when you think about some of the listings, especially in Revelations, I believe Dan is absent. So we see in Revelation, Dan's actually absent from the list of the 144,000. But I believe there's a list in one of the prophets where Dan is present. So we see Dan that's present in a prophetic end time list from the prophets, but in Revelation, like I said, he's missing. And so I would say just because we have that discrepancy, among other things, he's he don't fit the bill. All right, let's look at Gad. Okay, what's he gets one verse, right? What's that say?
Gad, a raiding band raids him, but he raids its hills.
Okay. So when we look at Gad, it's interesting now, again, we see this thing. If we look at this verse, Gad, a raiding band raids him, but he raids its hill. This word is a derivative of Gad's name. This word is a derivative of Gad's name. This word is a derivative of Gad's name. This word is a derivative of Jacob's name. Right? So it's interesting when we see this thing that's going on with Gad. It's kind of interesting. Again, we see this in the Hebrew where Gad, you say Gad, a gadding band gads him, but he gads it's Jacob. You could look at that and say. Again, we look at this in the Hebrew as doing things with the Hebrew language, different kinds of wordplay that's going on. I think in the King James, I think it helps us to see that. What's that say? King James 49:19.
King James.
Oh yeah, it does do the same thing. Gad actually means a troop. Gad, a troop, shall overcome him, but he shall overcome it at the last. But really, that word to overcome really is troop. It's really the same word. Like I said, it's a derivative of his own name, a play on Gad's name there, which is just another little interesting thing to look at. But it's not something that's overwhelming. It's not something that's giving us the idea that this is This is the one, right? Naphtali. Naphtali. What's that verse there? Verse 21.
Naphtali is a deer let loose. It gives words of elegance.
Now, when I think about a deer let loose, deers are little deers to me are kind of like squirrels. When you see like a squirrel where it's kind of like it's on edge. Yeah, just the slightest little thing is causing it to dash off and run.
But it
Or,
looks wise.
huh?
But it looks elegant while it's running.
Oh yes, yes, it does. It definitely does that. It definitely does look elegant. It's leaping over fences and bushes or what have you. It has that. But to talk about something that looks good while it's running away, you know what I mean? I don't know how much. I don't know what I can necessarily. I can't really do much with that to say that it looks good as it moves away, out of the way. Yeah, and it speaks well, right? Not the deer, but the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It speaks well, right? Again, there's nice things to say, but it's just not. It's not that. It's not. It's almost as if Jacob is. He don't want to not say anything. He don't want to. He don't want to just not say nothing. He got to give him something, right? Naphtali, is like one of the sons from one of the handmaidens, right? He's giving them something, but it's nothing to really to
Get excited.
no.
I'd be mad about that one.
Yeah. No. Wait, did I skip Asher? Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
All right, we don't want to skip Asher. Let's see here. Let's talk about Asher. That's crazy. Why would I not put Asher in the slides? I'm sitting up here. Asher. That's at verse 20. Read that.
Amen.
49 verse 20. That's terrible.
It says, out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties.
Okay, very good. So when we look at Asher, my version actually says his food is delicious. Right? And so when we think about Asher, we have the idea when you look at like pictures of old time pictures, they will oftentimes make people who were prosperous have a little belly. They would have like a little pouch, and that would be a picture of prosperity. They weren't wanting as it related to foods and things. And so when we think about Asher, is really speaking about Asher in that way, in terms of his fatness and his prosperousness. He will certainly prosper and be good at the things that cause prosperousness, right? If he shall provide from the king's delicacies, like it's almost as if he's adding to the things that the king is receiving. So again, we look at Asher as kind of just an idea of, you're going to be a prosperous. You're going to have these things which other people could probably just think about having it, but you're going to actually have those things, right? Okay, so Asher, that's huh? Yeah. Well. Okay, so let's keep on going over here back to Yosef. Can't believe I skipped somebody. That's terrible. They got skipped out of the slides altogether. Yosef. Okay. All right. Yosef. In my other version of this, there's so many words to say about Joseph. I couldn't even fit it all on one slide. But these did it. I changed versions and it got.
Jacob, he really did like this. No
Yeah. Okay, go ahead and start reading there. That's verse 22.
Joseph is an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree, an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree by a fountain. His branches run over a wall, and the archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him and hated him. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone. Wait a minute. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, from the El of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of the heavens from above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father have excelled and the blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the limit of the.
Not fast enough. Oh, you got to be kidding me. All right, I didn't even put that on there. Okay, so where we are?
26. 26.
I cut that off. I did a terrible job with my slides this time.
I'll read 26.
Yeah.
The blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors unto the utmost bounds of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him that was separate from his brethren.
Okay, very good. So when we look at actually Joseph, when we look at Joseph, there's interesting things that's going on with Joseph. It talks about Joseph. Now, to me, it seems as if the things that are said about Joseph are the things that we actually see within Joseph actually going on in terms of the abundance that's going on with them currently, right? So Joseph is at this place where the offshoot of his branches is just crawling up the wall and going over the sides, right? His prosperity is such that it's just growing all over the place, and that's literally the case. They got so much that they're setting up there being the sustainers for all of the neighboring peoples. Everyone around them is all feeling the effects of this famine that they were going through. Meanwhile, Joseph and everybody who's connected to him is all getting rich as a result of it.
He literally put up, we said 70 people.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. And everybody else, they're out there in the middle of a pandemic, and everybody's suffering, and they're living fine, perfect, right? Now it's interesting when we look over here now at these following verses, 23 and 24. To me, when I look at this, it's almost dealing with him and his brothers. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him, and hated him, but his bow remained in strength. These people sat up here and tried to shoot him down, but they was not able to do it. Right? The arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov. To me, when I look at these over here, is really dealing with Joseph and where he relied on the Most High in order to even get to the place where he was at, even just right there, in spite of whatever the circumstances was that got him there, right? So in spite of these enemies that came against him, that tried to shoot at him and shoot him down, he was able to prevail in spite of those things due to the strength that was provided him by the Most High. And so if we look down, let's see at 26, the blessings of your father has excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the limit of the everlasting hills. And so, and on the crown of the head of him who was separated from his brothers. Again, we look at his whole blessing. It's great, this blessing. It's a great blessing. There was many things to say when you look at that. But at the same time, when we think about this, how can we look at this in kind of a last end times kind of a situation? Because basically what we see there was their current reality. I mean, we could potentially look forward to Ephraim and Manasseh and connect that to Joseph, right? And see that the son of Joseph literally became the northern kingdom was literally Ephraim, right? And so they were the prevailing tribe of the whole nation. And so we could look at we can look at it from that perspective and see, looking forward, where when we get, especially in this last part, where we see, and on the crown of the head of him who was separated from his brothers, we could potentially look at that verse even to deal with the fact of the separating of the kingdoms, right? But to me, it seems like, again, for the most part, when we look at that, it's really it deals with the idea of Joseph being a great in his own right and blessed beyond measure, but comparatively speaking, none of these match up with this Judah one, who right.
It talks about the crown on his head, because again, Jeroboam and then that line down for the northern kingdom, that came from Ephraim.
Yeah.
But Judah was the one that lasted.
Right.
And the scepter will never depart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even while you had those kings in the north, you still had Judah in the south who had their kings.
His scepter didn't get taken away.
Yeah. So even in that, and we look at that from that perspective, you see how that line rose but it didn't diminish from Judah's line who kept going, which is
And
interesting.
they had better kings.
Yes, I mean there's
They had
that.
some. They had at least had some good kings.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's just bring it together with verse 27 there. You read 27.
And Benjamin is a wolf that tears. In the morning he eats prey, and at night he divides the spoil.
Yeah. So Benjamin, I really feel like Benjamin kind of was like one of those other ones where he is giving you like when you think about wolves, it in my mind anyway, I think of wolves as being like these scavengerish animals that just go around and they just do like the best they can, and scraps and all of this. And even when we think about Benjamin, right? Benjamin was connected to Judah, right?
Right.
His greatness lies in the fact that he was attached to this other brother who was indeed great, right? No, Benjamin. I'm saying in terms of the tribes.
Oh, where they were situated.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Benjamin was in the southern kingdom, right?
Yeah, it was.
And so.
And Benjamin also lasted as well. I mean, some of Benjamin.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah. So
they lasted through the
because of the fact that Benjamin, in his whether it's just proximity, or what have you, they ended up being one of the tribes that lasted the longest. Even though we see this little thing, in the morning he eats prey, and at night he divides spoil. It says a little bit, but it also says a lot, right? Because Benjamin's getting his. Right. And then we look down the line, we see that Benjamin again was attached to Judah, who, even though they went off into captivity, they made it out.
They made it back. I mean, Apostle Paul came through Benjamin. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's just finish up with just reading. We just read 28 through 33. We'll finish up here.
All right. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is what their father spoke to them. And he blessed them. He blessed each one according to his own blessing. And he commanded them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron, the Hittite. In the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial site. Here they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. Here they buried Yitzhak and Ribka, his wife. And there I buried Leah. The field purchased and the cave which is in it from the sons of Heth. And when Yaakov ended commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last. And
okay, very good. So, yeah. So when we look at this, right? When we look at this again, it's interesting. Yaakov, he's at he gets up his last amount of strength that he has. He gets himself out halfway out of bed and gives these grand words to the people, his sons, the blessings, their last blessings, and then he gives his final orders for where he wants for his body to be at. And he gets back in his, puts his little feet back up in the bed, and goes on to be with the fathers. But again, what we want to be able to take away from all of this is that each one of those blessings that Jacob blessed his sons with really was something that was based on the character of each of the brothers. And so therefore the way in which they lived their life, the potential that each one of them had inside of them, Jacob was able to look at their individual potentials and speak to those things, for each individual. And so what we want to be able to do, in our lives and our situations, is to be able to allow for the Most High to be able to use us to our fullest extent. And when we're able to manifest the ways that the Most High has put inside of us, when we're able to allow for our natural, when I say natural, I mean for our the abilities that the Most High has placed inside of us. When we're able to allow the Most High to have those things that He already placed in us be cultivated and be manifest, is going to bring forth something that is magnificent for the kingdom. And so we have to be able to kind of allow for our gifts and our talents to be manifest, so that we're able to be effective for the kingdom. When we look at the 12 tribes, and especially when we looked at how it began, the way in which those brothers behaved, the thing that was inside of them, we saw examples where they were used for bad and where they was used for good. With Reuben and with Simeon, there was ways that was in them, which zealousness, is something that could be used for good. And then we see that with Levi, right, where they all kind of had that same kind of quality. They was all natural brothers too, by the way. Reuben and Simeon and Levi, they all had the same mom and dad, so they had those genes inside of them where they was moved to action. Reuben's, his action was about lust, but he was still moved to action. Right? And the same thing with Levi and Simeon. But we see with Levi where that same potential was able to be turned into a positive direction. And we want to be able to allow our potentials to be manifest in that same way, where if we allow the Spirit in us to be cultivated and grow properly, it can move us in the right direction, where we're able to be representatives for the Master and receive blessings and not curses. Okay, so saying all that, do we have any parting thoughts about any of those things?
I don't think that I've ever really put it together on the whole Judah getting escalated up to the top, all the way, like how it was brought out now, and also Ephraim getting promotion as well.
Yeah, right, because there was nobody left. Right, if you got Reuben and Simeon and Levi moved out of the way, which they were all literally moved out of the way, Then the next one there is Judah. Right. So we could think about, well, how is it that Judah is that one that gets that preeminent position? But he was the next in line. He was the next in line.
Clearly, and I think about that story with Tamar. He clearly had some personality conflict.
Yeah, but it wasn't that bad, obviously. He had some problems, and it wasn't that bad though. He fancied certain things. And David, line of Judah, Solomon, the line of Judah. They had, you can see that DNA is there.
To this,
right? Huh?
To this day.
To this day. To this day. Right? Yeah. Okay, so that being said, you got anything to add to any of that?
Yeah, like I said, I just see the personality still, holding true to this day. When you look at, our people worldwide and just the different things that, they do and the personalities that they have, you can see still, the genes is mean, man. When it's in your genetics and you was this way back then, you still got the same issues today. And I think people, need to identify, the certain issues that are hindering them, and and just fight the flesh, and just hold on to Yeshua, and I think they can conquer a lot of these different quirky personality traits.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that being said, we're gonna go ahead and shut it down for today. Y'all willing, we will be back on next week to finish up the book of Genesis, and we'll go on from there. So we'll say for now, Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy the rest of your Shabbat.
No.